Good morning and welcome to the V&A for today's session on the future of trainers. The challenge that we face as a species could not be more clear. We've just experienced the hottest summer that our species has ever encountered. And what we see at the core of this is a waste challenge. The way we are using, taking, making, and disposing of materials is challenging our climate ecosystem. 45% of the world's greenhouse gases can be attributed to the way that we are utilizing products today. At the heart of this, we have a design challenge. Fundamentally, this is a design opportunity. How we can eliminate waste from our products, how we can circulate materials and keep products in use, and fundamentally how we can design solutions that ultimately lead to the regeneration of natural systems. Now, as SAP, we work with over 90% of the world's big businesses. And it's clear that businesses have a huge access to the facts and to the information that can help them unlock these challenges. But the real question is, how do we enable the action? How do we enable action around the reimagination of business models? How do we enable the action to help utilize products in a way that can discover new markets? And how can we fundamentally redesign products and materials into ways that are sustainable at their core? 2-3 years ago, we had a world-leading shoe manufacturer on stage here talking about the challenges of pivoting their business towards one that's fundamentally sustainable. And we believe as SAP that the innovations and the collaborations that are necessary in order to drive change in this space are going to come from many different angles. So today we are joined by Michael Doughty from Hylo Athletics. They're fundamentally taking on the shoe challenge through the 23 billion shoes that we are consuming as a society each year. 22 billion pairs of those shoes are wasted each year. They're sent to landfill, they're incinerated, and the value is lost. So I'm delighted that we have people like Michael, himself a former professional footballer, who are taking on this challenge and really driving new innovation into the world in order to be able to address new ways of designing and rethinking this solution space. So I'm delighted to be joined by Michael. Over to you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for that, Stephen. As Stephen said, I'm Michael, one of the co-founders of Hylo Athletics, and very much feel like a former professional footballer today. Definitely this wasn't part of the training when we went through our football careers. But I guess a little bit about who we are and my story just to start. Hylo Athletics was established in 2020 with a clear mission statement to protect the future of running and sport. We are a community of athletes who love running and love the planet we run on. I had a sort of 10-year varied career in football. I tend to say to people, think of Messi and Ronaldo and don't think of me, and that usually sets their expectation levels pretty clearly. But I did manage 300 appearances and I guess understood really the context of the athlete and their relationship to products. Grew up in a household where my mum, before it was trendy, was kind of food composting and recycling, and the idea that we all had a part to play in this environment in the natural world was very prevalent for me. So as I sort of went through that career and started to have brand relationships and work with different types of products, I think the word I use is slightly underwhelmed with that relationship. Felt that outside of football I was talking about environmental issues, connecting to nature, very much kind of from a consumer lens, just enjoying different brands and aligning myself with ones that I thought shared those values. But then I went to work and felt like a bit of a fraud, to be honest, and put on my football boots and worked with different types of brands and didn't feel that alignment truly in myself. And then one day my co-founder, Jacob, called me up after being on a run and said to me that he felt that the products that he was wearing was quite incongruous to the environment in which he was running, and how did I feel about that as an athlete. Fortunately, I was the only athlete that he knew, and we had a long discussion about the context of performance and, I guess, athletes in a global climate crisis. Long story short, we actually just came to the conclusion that there wasn't a company at the forefront of performance that had on their hierarchy of, I guess, decision-making, sustainability at its core. Stephen spoke about some of the challenges, and I think for a lot of the brands I sympathize, because I think a lot of those challenges are inherited. It's very hard to implement effective sustainability strategy into a behemoth, into a supply chain, into a company that has a legacy of different types of production and methods. So, when I talk to people, one of our unique advantages is that we are starting from the ground up with that as a North Star for us in all of our decision making. Cool. So we sort of touched on it a little bit, but I just think this stat always completely blows my mind. And obviously fashion's well documented, but footwear as a product inherently requires a high level of performance. There is this very, very sensitive trade-off between performance and durability. There's also a very sensitive trade-off between performance and sustainability. And that's why it leads to this stat that if footwear was a country, it would be the 17th largest polluter. So trying to sort of make meaningful changes to that requires the whole value chain and requires a holistic sustainability strategy. I guess for context, I've alluded to it already, but I knew absolutely nothing about shoes 3 years ago and knew very little, I would say, around sustainability. I had sort of a David Attenborough education where I was sort of watching cool documentaries and getting inspired at home, but didn't really know anything about materials. Sort of fed a lot of the different kind of campaigns around recycled materials versus natural materials versus circularity versus water versus this, and about 6 months after 6 months I got home and I was like, we need to sort of objectify what this means. And I think the main thing that I've learned is that I think sustainability is a little bit of a fallacy. Sorry to put a pin in it, but we tend to think about impact. Every product you make has an impact, and you need to think carefully about why you make it, what the purpose is, and ultimately how to reduce that impact. And in order to do that, you need to understand it. I think a lot of people talk about sustainability as if it's this sort of, feel-good factor, which it should be for people, and I encourage that, but it's also, there's a realism to it, which is, unless a product regenerates out of nothing, unless my shoes kind of regrow after one use, that's not really sustainable. So how do we get really clear on what we're trying to achieve, and what are we trying to solve for? So I didn't get this checked by legal, so please don't. For those of you who understand that context, please don't get me into trouble. But just undo it. I think sport as an athlete for me has been propagated by this narrative of win at all costs. When I was growing up as a footballer, we were told to win and to compete, and that nothing else really mattered. And I think the context of that narrative is shifting slightly, could shift a little bit quicker, but as athletes now, and I believe everyone is an athlete, sorry to be cringy, but it's important that we think about our performance as athletes, but also what we stand for. And this picture sort of shows, obviously waste, but one of the key problems in footwear, which is end of life, Stephen said it, 22 billion out of 23 billion pretty much end up in landfill, and there's a lot of challenges around that. And again, as we talk about Hylo wanting to objectify some of our solutions, that was just an obvious one when I got into this. It was like, where did the shoes go? And how do we solve for that? So as I mentioned, Hylo exists to protect the future of running and sport. We're very choice in that mission statement. I think in order to do that, you need to make high-performance products. The biggest lesson I've learned on this journey so far is no one cares if the performance is not there. So how do we match performance as well as sustainability, and that sort of trade-off is really important. And I'm being slightly sort of tongue-in-cheek around no one cares, but I think really the scale happens in the performance, and the scale happens in bringing those two things together. And that will obviously help us achieve our mission. So these are some of our products. This is sort of where we've started, and next year we'll be releasing a shoe which is actually performance leading in a number of different functions and what makes it a great running shoe. And these products have built the business to date. I guess to come back to some of the solutions that we're solving for, all of performance footwear is propagated on fossil fuel petrochemical derived materials. So polyesters, nylons that have kind of high production requirements, have relatively emissive compared to other renewable materials, and cause a problem for us as we try to transition away from fossil fuels. So for us, when we think about that problem and we think about the IPCC, which is the interpanel sort of research on how do we evolve from climate change, it's moving away from fossil fuels. So our focus is around renewable materials. We're not at 100% renewable content yet because of that trade-off with performance, but we leverage nature, harness nature in order to achieve those goals. So one of the main materials that we use is PLA, which is a polymer that replicates the performance kind of demands, I guess, of a polyester, but the derivative is either sugarcane or cornstarch. So as you work down the list, you'll have optics on all of our materials. Every product we make, we give a materials inclusion list, because I think when you go to a shop and you buy food, you can pretty clearly see what you're putting into your body, and that's important to me. That when it's whether it's good, bad, or there's improvements to be made, we state it objectively so people have that information at hand, because on many different websites and a lot of brands will talk about this sustainable initiative, and then you do a deep dive into actually what the product's made from, and that can be questioned. So for us, it's about being objective of what we're trying to do. Cool. And then I guess how this ties into circularity and the context for this theme at the V&A. So how do we achieve circularity? Well, part of it is in the design, but that causes problems for sure when you're trying to factor in performance. I think a key part of it, which people don't talk about in that much capacity, is customer or kind of human engagement. The way we receive a product is incredibly easy these days. You check out and it's with you in sometimes the same day or within one day, and that process has accelerated kind of online consumption and the ease of consumption. And what we think about as a brand is how do we accelerate that customer engagement around care, repair, and recycling, and that I think is captured here in this solution. So in all of our apparel at the moment and coming into our shoes next year are NFC tags, and we have created a platform called Hylo, which is obviously a pun on Hylo. You tap your phone, you don't need a app, you just tap it, similar to a QR code, and Hylo pops up. It's a digital platform where you have care features, so videos about how to wash the product correctly, how to optimize for its performance. So simple stuff like people kick shoes off all the time with the laces on. I have been an offender of that, but the rate of decline on the shoe just by doing that is so much quicker, and just having these touch points where people can learn about longevity is really important. We've got repair captured in these platforms as well, so videos about how to kind of sew holes back on your garment. We've also embedded with a technology that supports local makers. So if you have a hole in your garment that you can't repair yourself, you can connect with a local maker and have that repair done for you. That's all captured within the platform. You pay within the platform, and within about 10 days, you can get that product back to you, which extends the lifespan from 12 to 18 months, depending on the garment. So that's captured there, and then recycling, which is by no means a silver bullet in the industry at the moment. There's lots of stuff around blended materials that you need to work with, and secondary performance value of a material that's been recycled. But the fundamentals for us is to get that product back, and we're working with a partner in Europe who can grind down our shoes, separate those component parts via weight, and then we're working on a slider, a flip-flop essentially, from those recycled parts. And that is captured in Hyloop. And our goal is for our customers to engage with it at point of receipt. So when you receive your product, clearly on the box around the product is information about how to engage with the platform, because we've seen once people engage with it, once they receive it, the rate of those recycling returns, the rate of that engagement is so much higher. So I sort of learned that there is solutions out there on the back end, but if you don't get the products back, then it's kind of irrelevant how clever your systems are. And through us, it's about creating an operating system that is a service to customers that makes it easy for them to engage with these things, so that we don't just capture the 1% of people that are really engaged with sustainability. We make it a behavior that changes the way people consume. And that really is the nub of circularity in my experience, limited experience so far, is the customer engagement piece and trying to make it as seamless as possible. So yeah, that's us. Run Like the World depends on it. I appreciate you guys having me, and happy to take any questions on that. Cool.
So thank you, Michael. Just a couple of questions, I guess, reflecting on your talk just now. So I guess one of the key challenges, I guess, you'd find if we're talking back to our speaker from a couple of years ago from one of the big brands, you know, the reality in terms of the materials you're sourcing, the reason I guess people are using petrochemical-based polymers is because it's cheap, it's predictable, it's easy to get hold of. You know, to create a scaled production system, it's necessary, essentially, is the argument. How do you think about that when you're approaching the design of a new shoe?
Yes, it's with great difficulty. I think the just pulling out a word there, necessary, is one that I would contend, because again, that is like a typical developer, not blaming you, by the way. I'm just saying that is a way of reasoning to go with the status quo that I think is just propagated in the industry. It's harder, it's more challenging. There's variability in the materials, there's difficulty in cost. All of these things are reasons not to do something. But in your hierarchy of decision making, if you say kind of climate and actual impact is at the top, then you will find solutions. They will be inevitably somewhat compromised in different areas, but that's how you enact change. Otherwise, you're just sort of, you get to a point and you're like, oh, it doesn't meet the scope that we want for the project, doesn't meet the cost base, and therefore it's just not worth it. Let's carry on with polyester. I think for us, it's about, I think, that journey of scale. So there are materials, renewable materials, certainly in uppers, where the performance is slightly different compared to midsoles, where they're brilliant materials and color fastness, production, I guess consistency, general performance and comfort are really strong, and investing in those suppliers and curating those materials is what we think about. But I would say the main challenge in footwear still to this day is the midsoles, so the squishy bit, for want of a technical term, and how do you bring renewable-based materials into that? Because that is, I guess, the workhorse of the shoe, and that does pose its challenges. So I guess to answer your question, it's about making sure that when you make decisions, you're making it with clarity on what you're trying to achieve, and not just and accepting it's going to be hard.
I mean, just out of curiosity, do you find that any of the materials you're using that are, let's say, more sustainable. Have you found that actually there's higher performance in those materials versus the petrol-based materials?
Yeah, 100%. So I don't want to give away too much because my product team will hate me, but next year we're bringing out a shoe that has better running economy, better rebound, and is a better shoe than our competitors, and we validated that through a number of test points. A lot of that is to do with the materiality. On the upper, we're working with a renewable-based material that comes from castor beans that is in the nylon family, but it is a better performing material than standard nylon. The color dyeing of it has been the challenge of it to scale, but we figured out sort of how to do that. And these materials are now becoming more and more available. Our apparel, obviously, where the performance is slightly different compared to shoes, the fast drying properties, softness, breathability, again, has been enhanced by the materials that we've been working with. Cost is always the issue, but that's where you have to think about engineering and what materials go where and how do you bring that shoe together.
I think we've probably got another minute or two. I'm not sure if there's any other questions from the audience.
Yeah, I just had a thought. But I'm understanding that certain shoes, all shoes, certain sports, like some for running, some for walking, some for football, some for. Is it not possible to have one shoe that does it all, or is that a naive question?
No, because it's exactly what I tried to do at the beginning of Hylo. I don't think it's not naive at all. I think there are types of shoes that can meet kind of almost like a Venn diagram that can sort of cover a big middle ground of exercise. And obviously with running shoes now, you've seen that being applied to loads of different use cases. I think when you're trying to achieve optimal performance, that's when specialism is really important. And I think what I've learned in shoes as well is it's not just about the performance, but it's about people. If people were all the same, it would be a lot easier. But people's feet, their mechanics, how they run is so different and varied. And if you don't cater for shoes for those types of people, you can actually enhance risk of injury and stuff like that. So we actually tried to homogenize a lot of our products at the beginning, but it was a bad decision because you end up being nothing to no one. And that's why I think loads of different shoes exist, because of human kind of variability and performance requirements.
Well, I think we're at time now, honestly, I think we could carry on this conversation all day, because I, for one, find it personally very interesting. But thank you very much, Michael, for your perspectives and insights today. Really appreciated having you on. We wish you all the best as you continue on this journey and grow and scale out Hylo.
Cool, thank you. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.